It was supposed to be a routine exploration mission, no different from the hundreds of others that Captain Ethan Marks had completed in his career as a deep space explorer. But everything changed when the communications link was lost during his reconnaissance of a distant, uncharted planet. What was once a peaceful space station mission turned into a nightmare. The last thing Ethan remembered before everything went black was the powerful magnetic pulse that enveloped his ship. A sudden, blinding light, a sharp pain, then darkness. When he woke, he was no longer aboard his ship. He was in a strange chamber, surrounded by walls that shimmered with an iridescent hue. His arms were bound by invisible restraints, and he couldn't move. He wasn't alone. A towering woman, easily 8 feet tall, approached him. Her skin was a deep purple, her eyes glowing bright yellow. She wore ornate armor, glowing softly under the dim light of the chamber. Her long, dark hair cascaded down her back, and her face was both strikingly beautiful and terrifying in its intensity. "You are in the presence of the Yvrellians," she said, her voice commanding and cold. "I am Alira, one of the commanders of our people. You have been taken from your world as punishment." Ethan's heart raced. "Punishment? What for?" he demanded, his voice shaky. Lyra's eyes narrowed. "Your people have trespassed on our borders, violated our sacred laws. For that, we have decided your fate." Before he could react, another figure entered the room. This one was even taller, her features more pronounced, her presence overwhelming. Lyra stepped aside, allowing the new figure to stand before Ethan. "This is our law, Earthling," the second woman spoke, her voice resonating with authority. "Your punishment is unlike any other. For your crimes, you are to mate with the Yvrellians for 50 years. You will be bonded to us, and your descendants will serve us for generations. This is the price you must pay for your people's transgressions." Ethan's mind reeled. "Made it? For 50 years? This was absurd." "I don't understand," Ethan said, trying to gather his thoughts. "What do you mean by a mate?" Lyra stepped forward, her voice dripping with disdain. "You will be ours, human. Your body, your strength, your very being will be used to ensure our survival. You will bear children, many children. Your human genetics will be mixed with ours to create a new generation of warriors who will serve our people." A mix of shock and disbelief ran through Ethan's veins. "You're insane. I'm not some breeding tool." Lyra and the other woman exchanged glances, and the woman who had spoken earlier spoke again. "Your resistance is futile, human. You will obey our will. The law of the Yvrellians is not one you can escape, and you will learn, in time, that there is no greater punishment than being forced to live among us." Ethan's thoughts were in turmoil. His mind screamed for escape, but deep down he realized something. The Yvrellians were not just any species. They were powerful, relentless, and deeply rooted in a culture of dominance and strength. There was no way to resist them. Months passed, and Ethan was forced into the Yvrellians' alien culture. He had been placed in a chamber within their highly advanced city, which was carved into the mountains of their homeworld. The architecture was vast, imposing, and otherworldly. The air was thick with the scent of alien flora, and the constant hum of their technology permeated everything. His every move was watched, every moment monitored. Yet, despite the terrifying nature of his captors, Ethan couldn't help but notice something he hadn't anticipated. The Yvrellians weren't just warriors. They were a highly structured, matriarchal society where strength and power were revered above all else. Their women were not only leaders, but the protectors and sustainers of their people. And their culture, while alien to him, had an undeniable beauty. He soon found that the bond he was forced into wasn't just one of physical connection. It was emotional. The Yvrellians didn't just want to mate for reproduction. They wanted a partnership, a bond that went beyond mere duty. In the Yvrellian society, reproduction and companionship were tied together. It was not a punishment in their eyes. It was a sacrifice for their species' survival, and it had been that way for centuries. Alira and the other Yvrellian women were both strong and compassionate, their personalities as varied as they were. But the most striking thing was how they viewed Ethan, not as a prisoner, but as a necessary part of their future. Though the idea of being mated to these powerful women repulsed him at first, Ethan slowly began to see a different side to them. Alira, for all her authority and cold demeanor, had moments of kindness. She would often bring him food, engage him in conversation, and share stories of their culture. As the months wore on, he began to learn the language of the Yvrellians, and his understanding of their people deepened. A year into his captivity, Ethan was summoned to a grand hall. Alira stood before him, flanked by several other powerful Yvrellian women, each more beautiful and formidable than the last. "It is time," Alira said, her voice filled with a gravity he hadn't heard before. "You have completed your trial, human. You have mated with us, born children, and learned our ways. But now, it is time for you to see what you have built." With that, Ethan was led to a large chamber. Inside, he saw dozens of children, half Yvrellians, half human, each with the same violet eyes as their mothers and the human resilience from his own bloodline. They were strong, capable, and quickly growing into their roles as warriors. They were the future of the Yvrellians. "You have helped create this future, Earthling," Alira said softly, her voice less harsh than before. "Your punishment has not been in vain. You have contributed to our survival, to our legacy. You have made us stronger." Ethan looked at the children, the realization dawning on him. Despite the cruelty of his initial captivity, he had played a part in something monumental. He had helped create a new generation of warriors, ones who would ensure the survival of the Yvrellians and their way of life. "You've given us more than we could ever repay," Alira continued, her gaze softening. "But you have also given us something else, an understanding that not all humans are our enemies. Some are capable of great strength and resilience, just as we are." Ethan stood silently, his thoughts swirling. It wasn't the life he had envisioned. It wasn't the way he had wanted to leave his mark on the universe. But in some strange way, he had done something meaningful. He had become more than just a prisoner. He had become a bridge between two worlds, one that might never have otherwise connected. 50 years had passed since his capture, and now, as an old man, Ethan stood once again in the great hall of the Yvrellians. His children had grown into powerful warriors, and his legacy would live on long after he was gone. His bond with the Yvrellian women, particularly Alira, had become something more than just duty. It had become a deep connection, one that had changed him in ways he never expected. The Yvrellians had kept their promise. They had punished him for his trespasses, but they had also given him a place in their society, a legacy, and a future. His years of mating and fighting alongside them had led to a shared understanding, one that transcended the borders of their races. As he looked at the generations that would follow, Ethan realized that he had done something even more significant than he had imagined. He had been part of something bigger than himself, something that would shape the future of both humanity and the Yvrellians forever.